2, 1, we're live.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Monday, August 16, 2021, regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. We have a very full house, and I think we have some folks that may be standing in the hallway. If they can't hear us or want to address the board when that time comes, if somebody could just poke their head out and remind them when that time arrives. Before we begin, please take a minute and silence your phones. And after that, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That sounded really great with full house. Okay, Mr. Hatfield, please take roll.
All right. Thank you, President McFarland. Calling roll. President McFarland.
Here.
Vice President Roush.
Here.
Treasurer Lauterbach.
Here.
Secretary Hatfield is here. Member Baker.
Here.
Member Blasey.
Here.
Member Frazee.
Here.
All members accounted for.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next up, we have our consent agenda, and starting with item 2.1, we have approval of the minutes from July 19, 2021, regular meeting. 2.2 is staff member who announced their resignation. 2.3 are a list of teachers recommended for employment for the 2021-22 school year. And item 2.4 on the consent agenda is approval of the payments school systems bills in the amount of $8,142,789. And the distribution of obligations by fund is included in the documentation.
I move approval of the consent agenda. Support.
Motion by Lauterbach, support by Roush. Any discussion regarding items 2.1 through 2.4?
Do we have no legal fees?
No, yeah, that might be a first, Brad, but yeah, none this summer so far.
All right.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, that takes us to item 3. 3.1 is a presentation to the board. We have our COVID protocols update. Mr. Jaster.
Thanks, Mr. McFarland. I think Mike is going to do the lead in here. I'm going to get the presentation up.
As the board knows, we've been meeting the 4 county superintendents along with the ESA superintendent with Midland County Health weekly for about a month now. Trying to stay current with all the protocols and where we should be and where we should not be at this time. The County Health Department is doing like everyone else, how they recommend that we adopt mandated masking, but not requiring that at this time. When they look at our county numbers, they're still not at a point where he would make that order for us to do so. You'll see in some of the protocols tonight that we've received guidance from them on isolation and quarantine. We'll go through that. Jeff will go through that a little bit. And one area that we're going to make a recommendation that we do something a little bit different in the elementary based on what we believe the potting protocol will assist us with. But I'll start from there, and Jeff, you can, and I can add in as we go.
Thanks. Yep, I'll jump right in. So as Mike mentioned, since July, those are really the 2 changes that we'll speak to tonight. A lot of the rest of the presentation you have seen before. So just a quick review. The approach is going to be to continue to layer protocols from cleaning and hygiene practices to better air filtration, cohorting kids, those kinds of things that we have done and learned about last year. We'll continue to do that. The second bullet, as Mike said, there will be new quarantine recommendations. Those just were released. As always, positive staff or students do need to self-isolate for that 10-day period or until they're 24 hours symptom-free. Mike did reference we have some new recommendations for preschool through 5th. Elementary buildings, part of that would be holding lunch in their classrooms instead of putting hundreds of kids in the cafeteria. And then, if approved, visitors and volunteers will always be masked. And just to clarify, if approved means if the visitor is approved and it's deemed necessary visit of some sort, the principal or the administrators will determine who has access and who doesn't, as is typical. So here is a summary of quarantine procedures, and really there's two scenarios that play out here. The first one is if an individual tests positive for COVID, as we said, they need to isolate. The second has to do with close contacts that can occur at school. And I think the good news in all of this is that even if there are close contacts, there's a mechanism in place that will allow kids to still stay in school with some additional requirements. And so what those are dependent on whether they have been vaccinated or not, simply because the way the illness progresses looks different for those who have been vaccinated versus unvaccinated in terms of when they're most likely to see symptoms and the viral load can be detected. So what they have recommended to us is that fully vaccinated can stay in school if they agree to get tested on days 3 through 5 after their exposure, and if they wear a mask until they're through that quarantine period of 14 days to make sure no symptoms emerge.
Jeff, I'd update your wording. So this was mandated. This is one piece that was mandated from Midland County Health.
Sorry, I apologize for that. The unvaccinated, again, can stay in school if they agree to have tests done days 1 through 5, and then again on days 7 and 9. And again, that has to do with the way the virus would progress for someone who was unvaccinated. And then development of symptoms or a positive test, of course, then requires them to be out of school, as I mentioned in the first block up above. So that is different. At the time of the July meeting, we had no idea of what the close contact quarantine was going to look like. We suspected that we were going to get changes, but these are the new changes that have come through. Next, mask protocols. So we continue to strongly recommend all students and staff when they're indoors wear masks. Again, it's not a required item, but they're strongly recommended. What we are going to ask is that consideration be given for the PK through 5 group. So these are the youngsters who can't be vaccinated when they're in the common areas. So when they arrive and depart the building, and once they're in their classroom, it's their decision, the family's decision, if they're going to remove the mask. Those are still optional in the classroom because they're in their cohort group. But again, anytime there's mixing of classes, mixing of cohorts, we're going to ask them to put those on when they're in the common spaces, traveling between rooms, and then they can come off. And as we had mentioned before, per the CDC order from January, our buses require masks because buses fall under public transportation in the eyes of the government, and that mandate has not changed. So that's since January 2021, public transit requires a mask. Miscellaneous items, as always, we're going to continue to recommend vaccines for those eligible to receive them. Self-screen, stay home if you're sick. Good hygiene practices, again, these are lessons that I know our elementary teachers will continue to reinforce with kids. They'll ask them to wash hands before meals more frequently, just good practice. We're going to continue to enhance our cleaning strategies and efforts. As we said last year, a great deal of money was spent on improved ventilation in our buildings. We're going to physical distance to the extent that we can. All classrooms, buildings have different spaces, so they're not going to be the same. It's not going to look exactly the same in every case. And then, of course, isolation and quarantine as required by the Midland County Health Department, which we just reviewed. The self-screening, this slide doesn't really need to be here, but essentially it's just reminding folks of what the criteria are. If you have fever greater than 100.4 or any of the other typical symptoms of COVID, we ask that people stay home. And then, again, we also mentioned this last month. We were waiting for additional guidance from MHSAA regarding athletics, but they have issued none. At this point, clubs and extracurriculars can still meet. And depending on those advisors, that will determine what those schedules and meeting locations look like. Currently, still no capacity or gathering limits have been given as guidance. And then we said previously that PE and band and other classrooms that can go outside, we will still encourage them to go outside, but certainly there will be inclement weather days where they will have to come in and they'll do their best to socially distance, spread the kids out when they're inside. And then the last point there in red, sorry I skipped over that. Again, as I said a minute ago, because each building has a slightly different layout, we are asking principals to work with their staff and their parents and students to make sure that everybody's aware of how these procedures, recommendations will look in their individual school, because it varies slightly from building to building. And that is the end of the update.
This, if you have any questions, these are all in compliance with our four other local school districts as well as the ESA. And what I've heard today is to the north, which is governed by a county health of about 20 counties. They're in lockstep with this, as well as I know Bay and Saginaw is. So the exception in the state right now is Genesee, where you saw that order for the 12 and under. And then probably about 10 districts, and those 10 districts were probably the ones who did not go to school last year. And so this right now is where school districts are, and I think we're an early start, and so we'll monitor numbers very closely, weekly with Fred. And remember, we have the ability to, if we have a case, to mask everyone in that building at that time. And so there's some things we can do, as we did last year, where we'd mask a classroom, or we'd quarantine a classroom, or we'd mask a building or quarantine a building. So we have a lot of tools at our hand still. I sent you the numbers from the county at this point in time, and there was only one 12 and under case in the last 10 or 14 days, I don't recall now, in there. And so our county's still relatively low, is probably the key on that.
Where were those 10 districts located? that you just
So there's 10
referenced?
counties that
10
Dr.
counties.
Morris, because they're more sparse, that she has 10 counties. So if we have a county health director, this health director does 10 in the north, so that would
Okay.
include Clare, Glenwood, Pinconning, those to the north of us, if
Okay.
you want to know what they're doing as well.
Okay. And are we aware of any other mask mandates by districts besides Genesee?
So I've tried to watch as close as I can. Genesee's the only county, and I've tried to watch other districts. Mount Pleasant has, quite controversial if you watched their events. Some of the schools that did not go to school last year at all, Ann Arbor, Flint, Detroit.
So on the Genesee County, who issued the mandate?
Yeah, county health director.
The county health department
Yes.
did. Okay, it was not the individual school districts in the county.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, does the Midland County Health Department have threshold numbers where they would ask us to act at this
Yeah,
point?
so that question's come up multiple times, and he's more likely to have the opposite. He says it's really difficult to put thresholds when to go in. There's really not much guidance, and Delta's a little different than other, but he most likely would use metrics. If we were to go in, how do we come out? You know, what would be the metrics used to come back out of it at this point in time?
And then, sorry, one other question. So some of us have young learners that may have issues with masks. Parents that want kids in masks, should they talk to their teacher? Can you give the public some guidance on whether or not we expect teachers to help those that
Yep.
families
Yeah.
that want it?
So it's elementary, which is easier in the secondary, and we assume it'll be class by class with parents. Teacher will know and help emphasize the mask wearing and those pieces of it. I'll add the reason that we add it, and that's our own unique twist on it, of we'll mask them when they're commingling anytime with a large group. But when they're in their pod of 22, 24 children, it's almost like a family. The odds are, if you've ever been in our classroom at that young age, the mask does not stay up and fit like you, Phil. And therefore, we feel that it's like your family. You're probably not worrying about each other. And if someone has one, then we're probably going to have to mask the full classroom, and we'll go from there. But our thought was they are a pod and they're together, and we're going to try to keep them together, hence the lunch piece. So we went back, we had to get a little bit of and they're working on it tonight, I think, the teachers, but last year, if you recall, we used teachers in Paris to cover those lunchrooms in the classroom. And so that's our plan again, and we were trying to get them into the cafeteria for normalcy in July, and sit in their pod that way. But now we're going to push them back to the classroom, at least temporarily, right? We'll see where these things go. There's still some belief that we'll follow what occurred in the United Kingdom, and maybe we come out of this in a short period of time, sometime late September or mid-September, it may start plateauing, going down. That's what I've heard, but again, I'm not going to play health expert.
Can I ask one about, I have young kids too in elementary, and I was talking to them today about what their days are going to look like next week. And recess is also cohorted, correct? You have areas of the playground that are basically marked off for each class?
Yeah,
Like it
so
was
when you
last
say
year.
each class, so
Or
that's
grade.
building by building, and that's Jeff's bullet point about each building has its own variance depending on how many spaces they have. It could be multiple pieces of it. But remember, protocols change when they're outside. And so when we're outside, we're not masking, and they're going to be able to play. But for contact tracing and quarantine, we're going to try to eliminate the space of that as much as you can. Okay. So if Central Park has, I don't know, and I'm probably not speaking this right, 3 or 4 play areas, they'll divide that the best they can amongst them. They will get socialization with other kids, which I think we found out last year they needed as well. So, but outside is a little different story.
Okay, thank you.
Who's responsible for contact tracing?
Yeah, so we do the legwork of it, Brad. So when they tell us we have a positive, because we can go in and we can try to determine, and it's back to 6 feet right now. If we were fully masked, it would be at 3. But they gave us these protocols to keep them in school because the vast majority of kids we quarantine never turn positive. And so when I say vast, less than 0.5% ever turn positive. So hence these change protocols on that. And from there, the order of quarantine and isolation is Midland County Health Department. It is not our order. We don't have authority to do that, and they have the authority to say you will isolate, you will quarantine, you will follow these protocols.
And they'll make those calls?
Yeah, they make the calls. We generally call a parent because it's good customer service and say you've been identified as such. The health department will follow up. And I don't remember, at one point I think we were saying 24 hours, but it may have gotten to be 48 or 72 because of manpower. The county health department was able to secure a grant where they're going to hire 4 additional nurses. They hope nurses could be social workers if they can't find them, to assist each school in contact tracing. The division of who they're going to have hasn't been broke out yet, but likely the size of our district compared to the others, there could be 2 assigned to us to help us with that.
Okay, thank you.
And are we better prepared to deliver distance learning to those students who are quarantined?
Yeah, I think maybe John brought that up last month with the swivel cameras and that. So we're ready to go, and I don't remember Penny's breakout, but we have 3 or 4 at the secondaries, 2 or 3 at the elementaries. We get a hot spot, we can certainly move those around. Okay. But by the way, we will not be going into full virtual mode. That is not allowed by law. That was something that did stay in when the school aid package went through, and so we will do 180 days of instruction. We could take a pause, I doubt that, but because I don't think our numbers are going to go in that way. We learned a lot from that last year, but we have to go a full 180 days face-to-face instruction.
Oh, okay.
What we did last year is no longer allowed.
Thank you.
All right, great questions. Any other comments?
One more just for clarification, listening to the close contact discussion. So K through 5, theoretically, if there's close contact, it should just be the kids in their classroom because they're wearing a mask in the hallway. They're not taking lunch in the cafeteria as a joined group of people. They're outside, somewhat segmented and no mask outside. So really, the contact tracing should just be confined to what's in their classroom.
Yeah, wouldn't say it's an absolute, but you're absolutely right, I think, in going that way. As well as in the classroom, we try to, the teachers know from last year, they'll group of 3 or 4 together, and that way, if there is a positive child, then it's a small group identified as the close contacts.
Thank you.
6 feet, 15 minutes or longer in the 24-hour period is what they're using still.
Okay, thanks for the update, gentlemen. We appreciate it. We are going to move now to item 4. These are the requests to address the board. And folks, we're going to do things just a little bit different tonight given the large number of people here. I have a list of 11 speakers wishing to address the board just in front of me. And I'm sure there's typically at least another 5 or so who didn't put their names on the list. So given the large number of people, we are going to reduce the speaking time tonight to 3 minutes. So I'm sorry if that upsets some of you, but in the interest of time and everybody waiting to address the board, we feel that's the fairest option here, given the large number of folks wanting to come up tonight. So just remember that we are here to listen, but we will not be engaging in active dialogue tonight. If you have a question that you want the board to address or answer, we will do so. We'll get that answer to you in writing as soon as we possibly can. So thank you for your patience and understanding. And again, I'm glad you're all here with us tonight. That being said, Angie Kelleher, did I say that right, Angie? Okay, the floor is yours. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight.
All the way up to the podium with the mic.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to talk fast. I'm here to speak on the campaign that some people have started to ban critical race theory from schools. This is blatant fear-mongering drummed up by some conservative strategists who want their base to be afraid of the other. You all on the board are smart. Don't fall for it. Christopher Rufo, a strategist who started this movement, was quite frank about how and why he had engineered this trend. He tweeted, "The goal is to have the public read something crazy in the newspaper and immediately think critical race theory. We have decodified the term and will recodify it to annex the entire range of cultural constructions that are unpopular with Americans." Some on the right are using these attacks as a tool to mobilize voters, take over school boards, and win local, state, and national elections. We all deserve an honest education about race in this country that discusses the reality of systemic racism, how it informs present differences in opportunities, and why addressing the harmful impact of systemic racism is important. Attempts to squash these conversations are attacks on racial progress and unity. Some have said that equity and inclusion work is about making white people feel guilty. Would we not talk about the women's suffrage movement because we don't want the men and boys to feel guilty? We must talk honestly about slavery, colonization, redlining, Jim Crow, and the whole history of racism in this country. Not so that white folks like me can feel ashamed, but so that white folks like me can learn and not repeat the mistakes of the past. In our public schools, our kids deserve age-appropriate and accurate history lessons, helping them to become critical thinkers. One of the pillars of our community, Dow Chemical, has made inclusion and equity a priority. They lent us one of their executives for a whole year to begin this process. They want our community to be welcoming to all and for all types of people to feel at home here. Some of you know this. State Superintendent Dr. Michael Rice said last Tuesday, to choose to ignore race and racism in our teaching is to erase history and to shortchange our children who deserve to learn the full breadth and complexity of our history. He also said, race and racism may be inconvenient for some, uncomfortable for others, and searing for still others, but they are part of our history and they must be taught. I have confidence in our teachers to work through and teach these challenging issues. And I'll end by saying our inclusion initiatives, the work that you all have done, and Ms. Miller-Nelson and Dr. Beasley and Mr. Hogan and other teachers and administrators and students, this work toward more inclusion and equity is hard work, but it is crucial work. We are on the right path and we are making progress. Please don't let some fear-mongering and misinformation stop our district from doing this work.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. John Kowicki. Welcome back, Mr. Kowicki. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I love Midland. I have for my entire life. And I've been going over the workshop from a year ago, and I just picked out a few words, and after I watched it 4 times, I've taken notes on the DEI program, because you're going to get a different perspective than this lady that just came up in front of me. And it's from my personal experiences. And after I watched it, I asked my wife, are we having racial problems here in Midland?
Now, there are, in the country, there are problems, but are we here in Midland? And she said, I don't think so. So I started asking some friends, and I only had one criteria when I talk to people. Do you add to or subtract from living in Midland? Because if you subtract from living in Midland, I'm really not interested in what you have to say. And over the last 2 months, over the board, I go, no, we love Midland. It was, I really couldn't believe it, from all different kinds of backgrounds. So I just made a couple little remarks here. At the 18-minute mark, systemic racism, white privilege. At the 21-minute mark, equity audit, equity and inclusion, personal experiences. The 33-minute mark, hate speech guidelines. 46-minute mark, grants, CARES Act funding. 56-minute mark, words matter. 59-minute mark, how to be an anti-racist. I'm going to cover that right now. I got my own copy, and I went through it. And I am really glad that I grew up in Midland, Michigan. This gentleman had experiences that I never had. And it was eye-opening, and it was challenging to get through it. It actually took me a while, but I made it through. And at the 1 hour and 11-minute mark, Black Lives Matter. Injustice for one is injustice for all. I agree with that. At the 1 hour and 26-minute mark, programs for preschoolers and elementary. So I'm going to give you my personal experiences. I grew up in Midland, Michigan, Midland High School, no Dow High School. We played in the Saginaw Valley League. I had no personal interactions with a man of another race, only competition until I got to Northwood. And had I been given all the words, all the anti-racist and racist and comments that's on this page I copied from this book, I may have approached things differently. And I got to tell you, it was a fabulous year. I went there not to go to school, I went there to play ball. And my grades reflected it. And I left, joined the military. And in the military, it's a team. You play as a team. 1 year, I played on the base team. I was stationed on a base of 20,000 men, not 20,000 students, 20,000 men. I was one of 2 white men, an all-black team, black coach. There was no white privilege. You had to earn a spot if you wanted. I believe in earning a spot.
Thank you, Mr. Quickie. Next, we have Ms. Allison Wilcox. Good evening, Allison. The floor is yours. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Allison Wilcox. I've been a resident of Midland for 21 years. Both of my children attended Midland Public Schools, including Cook Elementary, Jefferson Middle School, and Dow High. They graduated from Dow High in 2008 and 2011, so it's been some time since I've had a child in school in Midland, but as a citizen and taxpayer of this city, I'm still interested in the quality of our local public schools and in what our students are learning. I'm here today to say thank you to the Midland Public Schools administration, school board, and staff for their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I understand that it's been a journey to get where we are today, and that journey is not over. But I visited the MPS website not long ago, and I was glad to read this statement. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a strong emphasis for Midland Public Schools. Lead with respect, trust, and courage. Encourage an equitable, collaborative, and inclusive culture. Enable all to achieve success. Midland Public Schools is committed to creating an equitable and anti-racist system that honors and elevates all. I know that it took a lot of work on the part of many people to help MPS develop this vision statement. Thank you to all of you for the effort that went into it. Earlier this year, Midland Public Schools hired DeAndre Hogan as the full-time director of diversity, equity, and inclusion for the district. I heard Mr. Hogan gave a presentation to a community group a few months ago, learning more about the steps the district is taking as they work to live up to this vision statement. I'm here today to encourage Midland Public Schools to continue that work towards making the vision statement a reality so that all of our students understand what it means to live in a culture where everyone is respected and included. Now, when we look around us in Midland, it's easy to think that we don't need to worry about diversity. After all, Midland is a very homogeneous place where everyone is the same. When my family moved here in 2000, according to the census, Midland County had a population that was 95% white, 1% Black or African American, 0.4% Native American, 1.49% Asian, and 44% from other races, and 1.09% from 2 or more races. 20 years later, our population numbers are about the same, but our demographics have changed. Midland is 89% white, 1.2% Black, 2.1% Asian, and 5.8% of the population identifies as multiracial. Midland is changing. There is support in this community for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilcox. Next is Carla Spears. Ms. Carla Spears. Hi, Carla. Thank you for joining us tonight. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So you've addressed several of my concerns tonight, but I do want to speak for a moment. I'm a research technician at CMU. I've worked in vaccine research and development and virus isolation for diagnostics. I'm a fairly recent transplant here. My family moved in 2017 from North Carolina, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. So I am so thankful that you guys are following and working so closely with the Department of Health to keep our children safe. It's really encouraging to see that you are recommending vaccines and even working with the health department to have the vaccine clinics in the school this week. I hope that you continue to do this, and I want you to not be afraid to make evidence-based decisions, even if they're politically unpopular. Your leadership matters, and we rely on you to make proactive decisions to keep our families safe. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spears. Mrs. Stacy Malecki. Stacy. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, I came up here confident that you all were going to hear me, but with the beginning of how this started, I honestly feel like this isn't going to fall upon deaf ears. So let's start. Hello, members of the school board, and hello, Superintendent Sharo. My name is Stacy Malecki. My husband and I have a son entering his sophomore year of high school at Dow High. Now, although there are numerous things I would love to address tonight, I'm going to stick with two very powerful words. Thank you. Thank you for allowing our children the opportunity to breathe freely in school. Thank you for not forcing masks upon them. Coming from a mother that not only had to wash these germ-infested cloths, but also a mother that watched the demeanor of her child change throughout this year, I just want to say thank you. It took a toll on all of us, but the kids took the brunt. I won't give you facts that I have found supporting the mental toll that this took on all students. All I want to do tonight is look each one of you in the eye and say thank you. And if you're in need of a cheerleader to be by your side as you're trying to be forced in another direction, please call on me, because I will be there for you. Thank you for having our children's best interest. I know this is not easy. I really do. But from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And please stay strong. Please stay strong.
Thank you. Okay, next is Miss Wendy Brand. Hi, Wendy. Thank you for joining us tonight. The floor is yours.
Life as we once have enjoyed it is gone. There is no more having freedom to choose, to choice, to travel wherever you want. No opportunity for your children to attend the schools that focus solely on their education, empowerment, and learning critical thinking. It has been slowly stolen and has been taken away by those who are choosing to blindly follow an authoritarian narrative, and by those who know better but yet are choosing to do nothing. But it doesn't have to be forever, and the choice is up to each and every individual in this and every other room that in this still potentially great country and world. Remember when you could wake up with little worry about where you could travel and whom you could visit? Remember when you could freely enjoy a meal out with family and friends? Remember when you could be next to another human being without fear at your jobs, businesses, churches, family gatherings, schools, travel, entertainment events, hugging another person, a doctor's visit, or grocery store? Remember when you could sneeze or cough in public without fear? Remember when you could go freely to a hospital or a nursing home without others fearing that you could cause them great harm? Remember when you could attend the funeral of a loved one or a friend to pay your respects and say a last goodbye? Remember waking up unencumbered by what's going on in your state, town, country, or world, which has impacted your entire life? Remember when you could see beautiful faces of God's creations and sharing a passing smile without fear of being too close and breathing the same air as someone else? Remember the freedom to plan your future knowing that most all things are possible? Remember when you could freely visit your children's classrooms? Remember when you could trust those that you voted into local office and other to have your best interest at heart? Remember what it was like to be excited to attend your child's graduation? Remember when you could plan your life even months or even years in advance, fairly sure that you could accomplish these goals? You could speak freely, make honest mistakes, and you could make your own decisions about your health and your children's health because you knew it was best. For those who are old enough, remember when you could turn on your television and find wholesome, family-friendly shows that may have even taught moral values and godly principles with no sex, no slaughtering other people, no openly and pridefully sinful acts, and few drugs displayed for the world and your children to see? Those are the things that we will have to teach our children because they won't know or experience them themselves if the current trends continue in this direction. Without concerned individuals speaking up, your children will have only this knowledge because of the history lesson. And so now, just remember 7 generations ago that we had all of those. Now we question our future, fear our neighbors, are angry with those who make decisions outside of ours, and we fear entering other places. Just remember that Jesus said, "Be still and know that I am God." God bless America, and God bless you.
Thank you. Miss Nikita Murray. Hi, Nikita. Thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Dr. Nikita Murray. I have lived in Midland for 30 years as of this past April. During those 3 decades, I have had the opportunity to engage with Midland County school students as an advocate, a consultant, a counselor and confidant, a reporter of their high school and middle school sports, a supporter in multiple ways. As a homeowner, I am a financial supporter of the school district despite not having children as students here. I am still a stakeholder. Like many financially invested residents here, I have held the private joy believing that children can have the opportunity for a stellar educational experience. As I have thought about how to help shape thinking around fears about student learning, and what really comes down to introducing students to history that is complete, inclusive, and factual, I am taken back to my doctoral studies in counselor education. I am reminded of discussions around pedagogy, critical thinking, ethical responsibility, and accountability. With these things in mind, I would like to share something from one of my classes on teaching, which may be familiar to educators in the room, and it's called The Courage to Teach by Parker J. Palmer. And it reads, if we embrace diversity, we find ourselves on the doorsteps of our next fear. Fear of the conflict that will ensue when divergent truths meet. Because academic cultures knows only one form of conflict, the win-lose form called competition. We fear the live encounter as a contest from which one party emerges victorious while the other leaves defeated and ashamed. To evade public engagement over our dangerous differences, we privatize them, only to find them growing larger and more divisive. If we peel back our fear of conflict, we'll find a third layer of fear, the fear of losing identity. Many of us are so deeply identified in our ideas that we risk losing more than the debate. We risk losing ourselves. So as we think about the discussion around critical race theory, this really isn't a topic for fifth graders. Trust me, having written a dissertation grounded in critical race theory and critical theory, it is not for K-12. But it is for leadership, and that's the leadership of the school board, to guide educators, staff, students, and stakeholders in promoting inclusive teaching and learning across the curriculum and advocate for excellence.
Thank you. Mrs. Judy Kowicki. Hi, Judy. Thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Well, we're here concerned about diversity, and I think we have it in this room tonight, don't you? And that's a good thing, because ideology is what this is all about as well. We have diverse thoughts, we have diverse experiences, and yet we can come together and hear each other's ideas and be respectful and supportive of one another. And I'm proud of everybody for that. No judgments. I have just a short story for you tonight to help provoke some thoughts. This is from a teacher, and it goes like this. This starts my 22nd year of teaching middle school. Yesterday was quite possibly one of the most impactful days I have ever had. I tried a new activity called the baggage activity. I asked the kids what it meant to have baggage, and they mostly said it was hurtful stuff you carry around on your shoulders. I asked them to write down on a piece of paper what was bothering them, what was heavy on their heart, what was hurting them, etc. No names were to be on the paper. They wadded the paper up and threw it across the room on the floor. They picked up another piece of paper and took turns reading out loud what their classmate wrote. After a student read a paper, I asked who wrote that and if they cared to share. And I'm here to tell you I have never been so moved to tears as what these kids opened up about and shared with the class. Things like suicide, parents in prison, drugs in their family, being left by their parents, death, cancer, losing pets. One said their gerbil died because it was fat. We giggled, and on and on. The kids who read the papers would cry because what they were reading was tough. The person who shared it, if they chose to tell us it was them, would cry sometimes too. It was an emotionally draining day, but I firmly believe my kids judge a little less, love a little more, and forgive a little faster. This bag hangs on my door with all of these wadded up pieces of paper in it, and they look at it every day. And what I'd like to share with you that I got from that is that we all have our own experiences. We come from different places. We can't match anybody else to match an ideology or an understanding. And as I left them, she said, they are not alone. They are loved, and each one of these students, just the way they are, we have their back. That was from Karen Wunderlich Lowe. So what if we had all been taught what is being proposed to be taught to our children. How would we be different today? Pretty scary thought sometimes. So please, please mindfully love every single one of these kids who are entrusted to you. Please, please teach them that each of them is a child of God, unique and loved just as they are. Please, please focus on the sameness of all and not the differences. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Miss Ann Putnam. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
I am here to speak to what I know as the truth. And I quote, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Apostle John. Bill of Rights, Amendment 10. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people. So I ask, what educational powers does the United States Constitution grant the federal government? Article 1, Section 1, or Section 8 of the Constitution granted the power to lay and collect taxes for the general welfare of the United States. Under this general welfare, the federal government has assumed the power to initiate educational activity. And not just with taxes for education, but how we educate and dictate how taxes are used. By dictating how, whatever. By dictating with the taxes, allotting it towards certain education. Okay. We the people did not correct their wrongful assumptions and their overstepping of boundaries, nor did we stop them when creating a Department of Education to oversee our schools. Nowhere in the Constitution did we, the people, specifically delegate educational power to the federal government. We reserved these rights in the Bill of Rights and the Michigan Constitution, Article 1, Section 1. All political power is inherent to the people. Government is instituted for their equal benefit, security, and protection. That means we, the people, have the power, which includes the power to decide what our children are taught, which includes us to make health and safety choices, not MDHSS or other health departments. The government has committed fraud against us, overstepping their boundaries outlined in the Constitution for generations. And we have been asleep. It's our job to correct their wrongs. It's our job and it's our time to awaken. We must make a choice to either continue to be complicit or to stand on the constitutional foundations we inherited for the good of all. We, the people, elected you to stand for us, and we are here to ask you to do just that. If you stand with us, we will stand beside you to stop the abuse of power. Now I ask, stand to return the power of education to we, the people. Stand to stop government overreach. Stand to stop the indoctrination of our children with critical race theory. Stand to stop the medical tyranny. Stand for parents' choice on masks. Stand for what is good and right. Stand with we, the people. And I quote, God breathed life into them, and they stood up. Revelations 11:11. We are not fighting against flesh and blood, but against the evil that is before us.
Thank you, Ms. Putnam. Ms. Lisa Hanson. Hi, Lisa. Welcome back.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much. My daughter is 15 and attends Dow High. I was almost 37 when she was born. I had challenges getting pregnant and lost my first child to a miscarriage on Mother's Day. My daughter came 6 weeks early and spent her first 3 weeks in the NICU. I almost died during her emergency C-section. I've never shared this before, but I want you to know where I'm coming from. I said goodbye to my child before I met her because I was willing to die so she'd have a chance to live. I take my role as a parent very seriously. My daughter is healthy, happy, confident, faith-filled, smart, funny, and beautiful. She loves sports and she has amazing friends. I love her more than anything and I could not be more proud. So I'm here to stand up for parents' rights. My hope is that by sharing my perspective tonight, you'll continue to stand strong and not bow down to the powers that be. The CDC and Health Department are unelected officials that share recommendations. It's not your responsibility to decide or dictate what's best for our kids' health. Every child has individual needs. We'll never know the emotional and physical or psychological damage we've done to our kids with masks and tests and quarantines. Those are scars we can't see. Let's just hope they pray and heal. Our kids need us to protect them from more than just COVID, which, by the way, offers a 99% survival rate. So there are doctors and experts on both sides of the science. It's the parents' job to decide what's best for their kids. So for parents that want to send their kids to school with a mask, I won't judge you. If you want to vaccinate your kids, I won't judge you. If you want to COVID test your kids, even though the FDA recently recalled PCR tests because they're faulty and ineffective, I won't judge you. If you want to believe in asymptomatic spread, even though Dr. Fauci's personal email to a friend stated that most transmissions occur from someone who is symptomatic, not asymptomatic, I won't judge you. I will extend this respect and right to you as my fellow American, and regardless of how you feel or what you think of me, it's your duty to extend that same respect and right to me. It wasn't that long ago that we could agree to disagree, so let's bring that back. Personally, I think that if the CDC and Health Department really cared about our health, they would have been teaching and preaching how to boost our immune system from the beginning, because a healthy immune system kicks COVID's butt every time. It's incredibly unfair. For you all and for us, it's incredibly unfair that it has come down to school boards and parents across this country. Our leaders have failed us at every level, but here we are at times such as this, and my hope is that I can empower you. You don't have to get caught up in the emotion and the drama designed around COVID. You simply have to stand up for parents' rights. The time is now to stand for American principles. If you don't, you'll be on the wrong side of history. America is the home of the free because of the brave. I stand before you today, a self-employed single mom who has put everything on the line to fight for my kid and my parental rights. As a school board, you took an oath to uphold our Constitution. Mandatory is not a law. Required is not a law. Mandated is not a law. Requested is not a law. To whom much is given, much is expected. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hanson. Okay, that is the end of my list, folks. Now is the time. If anybody else chooses to address the board, please raise your hand and I will, ma'am?
Board of Education, thank you for allowing me the time to speak. My name is Tony Hocken. I'm a former graphic arts teacher at the Saginaw Career Complex for 23 years. What is critical race theory? Critical race theory is an academic discipline formulated in the 1990s built on the intellectual framework of identifying identity-based Marxism. There are a series of things that have been deployed by its supporters to describe critical race theory, including equity, social justice, diversity, inclusion, and culturally responsive teaching. Critical race theorists, masters of language construction, realized that neo-Marxism would be a hard sell. Equity, on the other hand, sounds non-threatening and easily confused with the American principle of equality. In contrast to equality, equity has defined and promoted by critical race theorists is little more than reformulated Marxism. I say that critical race theory is becoming the operating ideology of our public institution is not an exaggeration. From the University of to K through 12 school system, critical race theory has permeated the collective intelligence and decision-making process of American government with no signs of slowing down. First, Too many Americans have developed an acute fear of speaking up about social and political issues, especially those involving race. Second, critical race theorists have constructed their argument like a mousetrap. Disagreement with the program becomes irrefutable evidence of a dissenter's white fragility, unconscious bias, or internalized white supremacy. Diversity training will make an outrageous claim such as all whites are intrinsically oppressors, and then will confront with disagreement. They adopt a patronizing tone and explain that participants who feel defensiveness or anger are reacting out of guilt and shame. Third, Americans across the political spectrum have failed to separate the premise of critical race theory from its conclusion. Its premise that American history includes slavery and other injustices and that we should examine and learn from the history is undeniable. But its revolutionary conclusion that America was founded on and defined by racism and that our founding principles, our Constitution, and our way of life should be overthrown does not rightly, much less necessarily follow. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Hi, how are you? Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hi, good evening. I hope I'm coherent. I left Florida this morning, saw my oldest son off. I just wanted to take a minute here to talk to all of you because there's something I'm a little unclear about, and that is when you're making decisions about the protocol, the COVID protocol in particular, as we go forward this year, I'm unclear as to how you're making that decision. It feels to me in the way that you talk and present that you are taking almost 100% of your recommendation from the Midland County Health Department. Is that correct? I know you're not answering me now, but I'm not sure I really feel that you all are taking the effort or making the effort to do your own research on the data. And the last time I had an opportunity to speak, I offered. I've got reams of data I would love to share on everything under the sun that you could possibly want to know about most of these things. I don't believe in narratives because everybody has a side. You can feel it in the room today. Everybody's coming from somewhere, has some agenda. I don't believe in any of that, so I just look at numbers. And if you could share with us what it is you're using to make your decisions, that would be really helpful. You know, masking is not a no harm done. I mean, you hear from many people, myself, I broke down at least once because it is an emotional thing on how much this can hurt our kids. And I just want to understand where you come from. You want to go toe-to-toe with me on data, and I don't mean that in an adversarial sense. I'm just saying I really want to understand where you come from. And lastly, we talked about this, I think, last spring when we took the last pause about the quarantining. Many of us here have had students who were quarantined. And I know there was follow-up with the health department, and most of those students, I couldn't find a single one who was, quarantined because of close contact, who actually ended up with COVID. So I would really, really ask that if this is something you're going to do this year, please follow up with some data. If you send my child home for 10 days and they miss learning for 10 days, please tell me that it was because there's a real risk. From what the health department told us last year, is none of those kids from close contact actually came down positive. I would think that that would be something we should be following up on. Does that seem reasonable? You know, and with the mask data, again and again, there's no statistical difference in every compared population. I wondered if any of you have spoken with Calvary Baptist. I believe they went the year without masks. Was there a major outbreak over there? Does anyone know? I never heard of it. So we have an opportunity in the exact demographic that we're making decisions on where we could say, hey, how'd it go? Because I didn't hear of any major issues there either. So I would just like to respectfully ask that if you go down this path, that you can provide us with evidence-based why you're doing it, with numbers, not just narrative. So that's all I had to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to address the board? Yes, ma'am. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Do I have to say my name and address again?
You can say your name.
Hi, I'm Katie Roble. I'm a parent of 2 children and, oops, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Katie Roble, the parent of 2 children in Midland Public Schools. And I wasn't going to speak when I came here, but I just wanted to take a quick minute and thank the school district and the board for continuing to defer to experts in specific fields. I definitely wouldn't want our opinion as parents to weigh heavier than the opinion of experts in teaching children math or teaching children best practices in writing. So I thank you for not letting our opinion as parents weigh more than the opinion of the experts with regards to the health and well-being of our children. I continue to thank you for, consulting the epidemiologists and not doing your own Google research and relying on that. And I thank you for continuing to explore best practices in teaching our children history through an appropriate lens that continues to evolve as we learn more about education for children. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? I'm sorry, I can't. Yes, sir. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Ryan Cox. I live in Midland, Michigan. I currently practice as a psychiatrist. I know psychiatrists aren't real doctors, but we are in fact doctors. We go to the same medical schools that surgeons and hospitalists and family medicine physicians go to. We train in the physiology of the human body and how disease and injury affects it. A question or a statement I make often to my patients is, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I want to pose another question. Is the cure, or in this case, the mitigating controls because we have no cure, worse than the disease? We are asking so much of our young children with all of these mandates. Have we stepped back and asked, is this right? How will this affect these generations years from now? We know children have a 99.997% survivability rate, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC. According to these same institutions, as of April of this year, 271 children have died from COVID, almost all of them with co-occurring illnesses. In 2019, 849 children died from car accidents. If we are creating all these mandates to protect against COVID, why are we still letting children ride in cars? I work in an inpatient geriatric psychiatric unit, and although I am at the other end of the spectrum when I take care of people, I've seen firsthand the psychological effects that this pandemic has had on our senior population. I've seen many patients with decades of sobriety relapse. I've seen an increase in anxiety, depression, and worst of all, suicidality. My fear is that we are creating another illness when our belief is we are helping our children. Initially, research showed a decrease in the suicide rate among children during the first few months of the pandemic. However, more recent research is deeply troubling. According to a report by the CDC, beginning in April of 2020, the proportion of children's mental health-related ED visits among all pediatric ED visits increased and remained elevated through October. Compared with 2019, the proportion of mental health-related visits for children aged 5 through 11 increased 24%, and 12 to 17 increased 31%. That was 2020, and 2021 is unfortunately looking more dire. In April of this year, since I'm quoting studies, MIT published a study that showed whether you are social distancing 6 feet or 60 feet, It matters very little. It does not mitigate transmissibility. Unless you are in a positive pressure lab with circulating air, it does not matter. I hope that we can come to a conclusion on what is right for our children.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you very much. My name is Mindy. I just wanted to first off thank you, school board, for all that you have done for our kids. I know that you probably have a job that sometimes feels very thankless, but I sincerely appreciate all that you do in providing education for our children. I feel like MPS did a wonderful job of providing families many options last year. I'm especially grateful that you're giving the parents the option to choose whether to mask their kids or not this year. With that being said, I do have some concerns I would like to address tonight. According to the CDC, just one confirmed case of COVID in every 1,000 is traced to outdoor transmission, new figures reveal. Of the 232,000 cases of COVID recorded in the state up to March 24th of this year, 262 were as a result of outdoor transmission, representing 0.1% of the total. 0.1%. The CDC is relying on a faulty study and initially was declaring that there was a 10% chance of transmission. After using the miscalculation to support outdoor mask mandates for over 300 million Americans, the CDC now says it is more like 0.1%. It is astonishing that such a key and controversial component of our COVID policies was not just based on a miscalculation, but never actively questioned or re-examined to discover the error. Not only does the science not support outdoor mitigation and segregation, but it's also been clear for months that outdoor transmission risk for COVID is nearly non-existent. Even Dr. Fauci has stated that outdoor transmission risk is minuscule. Please let our kids play where they want and with who they want. They've had enough disruption to their normal lives. Don't take away their freedom to choose where they play and who they can play with. The science does not support this. One other topic I would like to address is the mask issue. I've been a nurse for 16 years, most of that time working in the ICU and cancer inpatient medical floors. I'm familiar with masks and their effectiveness. Did you know that in a hospital setting, staff has to be tested yearly on the appropriate N95 mask that will be effective in preventing the transmission of these viruses? The only mask that is scientifically effective in protecting us from COVID is a fit-tested N95. So why are we strongly encouraging the masking? The size of virus is 0.1 micrometer, and the pores in a fabric mask are approximately 50 times larger. The science does not support this. It is essentially like throwing sand into a chain link fence. It does not work. I can provide the board with 47 medical journal studies, even among the CDC and NIH, that show this fact. Our kids need to see their friends' faces. They need to see their teachers' faces. These fabric masks, while I know for most are well-intentioned, do nothing in the stop of COVID scientifically.
Thank you. Ma'am, I believe you had your hand up. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. My name is Shauna Patterson-Stevens. I'm a mother. I live in Midland. My kids go to school in Midland. I also have a 2-year-old. So I have a 15-year-old and a 2-year-old, right? And one is driving me nuts, and the other has mood swings. So here we go, right? I cannot get him to stop putting things in his mouth. You know, he's licking everything. He's eating sand. And I know that's natural. That's what kids do. And my daughter doesn't talk to me. So here we are. What I would like for us to think about, and I know this is difficult, so here we go. What I know is difficult in all of this is that we're all stressed the hell out. We've got a lot going on. There is a global emergency. We have to pay our taxes. I'm worried about retirement. Like, all these things are coming together in a moment of high stress. Some of us are worried about jobs, right? So these things are very real, and they're impacting our lives. And unfortunately, what I see happening is, we're using spaces like this to play these things out on each other, which is really concerning for me when this is supposed to be a space for our kids. So I just want us to think differently about how we engage each other as neighbors and how we're thinking about informing our kids as they're growing up, because I'd rather use the town halls and local governance to talk about these issues. That's where I think they actually belong, and focus on what's happening in school districts and what's happening in the classrooms for this space. I'm also really concerned because, like I said, I have a 2-year-old and a 15-year-old. My daughter's going to wear masks in the school because we're concerned about my little guy. He can't be vaccinated and he's immunodeficient. So what happens when I've got this 15-year-old coming home, bringing all this extra stuff? I mean, I know there's hepatitis. I know there's all these other things, but if there's some things that we can do to limit his exposure to something that we still can't get a handle on, I don't want my son to be that 0.01%. I'm sorry. I think that's too many kids. I feel like if we really value our kids' lives, then we'll do what we need to do in this current moment, which is really uncomfortable and unfortunate. And no, we don't know the long-term impact, but there's a lot of things that we don't know with regard to what's happening at a global level with the pandemic. I'd rather just do what we know will be helpful in this current moment, and I appreciate y'all thinking about that when it comes to the classrooms, when it comes to them being on the school bus, when it comes to them being outside. So I appreciate you for taking some time to look at what's necessary, to look at what's recommended. And I just want to keep in mind that this is the school board and not the town hall meeting.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to address the board? Anybody else? Is there anybody in the hall that is standing out there? We said we were going to check at the beginning. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, well, we're going to close that portion of the meeting, and we are going to move on to Section 5, Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment. Let me ask you guys this. Do you want to stay for the rest of the board meeting, or does everybody want to get out now? Okay, well, we're going to move on then. All right, we have an action item, item 5.1. Ms. Miller-Nelson.
Good evening. I do have for you back for your action the book that was brought to you at the June board meeting for consideration and the 28-day public examination period. This book is titled Go Far with Chinese. It will be used in our middle school Mandarin Chinese classes. And with your approval, we will purchase those straight away to have here at the start of the school year.
Okay, thank you. I'll accept the motion for item 5.1.
Make a motion to approve purchase of the textbook in item 5.1.
I'll support.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Roush, support by Mr. Hatfield. Any further discussion regarding item 5.1?
Penny, I just had a quick question. Could you give just a basic overview of our Mandarin Chinese and how many sections we are teaching? Is it something just rough?
I would love to do that, and I might actually defer to Brian or Jeff on the specific sections. But if you'll remember, we started this in elementary and knew that it would be coming up through middle school. So this is our first year to have it in middle school, which is the reason for the book. Do either of you remember? Do we have?
Exactly. I think it's at least 2 sections, though.
2. I was going with 2, but we can get that information for you.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay, all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. Next up, we have item 6.1 FFO. These are study committee minutes. Mr. Lauterbach.
Thank you. The committee met on August 2nd. We discussed the East Lawn property. Sharon Mortensen and Grant Marshall spoke with the committee regarding the future use of the East Lawn property. We reviewed the June financials and found that June 2021 revenues and expenses were up in comparison to June 2020. This was primarily a result of the 2020 state aid proration, receipt of ESSER 2A funds, and the final payment of return to learn stipends. With respect to the Northeast air conditioning project, the committee reviewed bids for completing the air conditioning installation on the second floor of Northeast Middle School. The recommendation will be brought to the August board meeting, the next agenda item, tonight. We reviewed potential wage adjustments for hourly workers, and those are being considered in order to remain competitive in the current labor market. Next meeting will be September 7th at 5 p.m.
All right, thank you very much. Next up, we have item 6.2, another action item. This is Northeast air conditioning. Mr. Bruton.
Thank you, President McFarland. As Mr. Lauterbach just mentioned, we did accept bids to complete our air conditioning project over at Northeast on the second floor, and we are bringing to you tonight a recommendation to complete that installation with the inclusion of 6 condensers and 12 high-wall evaporators. We're recommending award to William E. Walter of Saginaw, Michigan in the amount of $145,000, and if you do approve, it will be utilized from the capital projects funds.
All right, thank you very much. I will accept the motion for item 6.2.
I move adoption of item 6.2, which is awarding the contract to William E. Walter of Saginaw, Michigan in the amount of $145,000.
Support. Motion by Mr. Lauterbach, support by Mr. Roush. Any further discussion regarding item 6.2?
Do we have to do any additional air scrubbing with the addition of these units for our COVID protocols?
So I'm probably going to not answer that very well, Brad.
Okay.
Yeah, we purchased air scrubbers for our large spaces in our building last year. I know Mike upgraded the filters in all of the HVAC units, and from there I probably would have to talk with Mike on that.
Okay.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Next up, Mr. Bruton.
Yep, thank you.
This is item 6.3, sorry.
Thank you. We have 2 gifts this evening that require your approval due to the size of the gifts. The first is from the American Dairy Association and their support for the H.H. Dow football program. The second comes from the Midland Area Community Foundation, but is due to a donation from the Karras family to the H.H. Dow Turf Project for $50,000. And we would appreciate your action this evening, allowing us to accept those gifts.
Okay, thank you. Accept the motion for item 6.3.
I'll take a motion that we accept item 6.3, the gift from the Karras family.
Support.
And just to be clear, that's the Karras family gift as well as the American Dairy
Yes.
Association.
Yes,
Okay.
and the American Dental Association.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Hatfield, support by Mr. Lauterbach.
Yep.
Okay. Any further discussion regarding item 6.3? Big thank you to both the Karras family and the American Dairy Association for very generous support of our district. With that said, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Next up, we have information only, gifts totaling $1,050. Mr. Bruton.
Thank you, President McFarland. As you mentioned, 3 gifts this evening totaling just over $1,000. The first from the Charles and Sharon Skinner, that was in memory of Ryan Maddox for the H.H. Dow baseball program. The Miriam Hillis Memorial Scholarship Fund to provide a dance scholarship at Dow High, and to a longtime supporter, First Robotics, to help support our FRC 5509 robotics team at H.H. Dow High. No action needed, just informing you of the generosity.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, we appreciate the donations. Next up, we have item 7. This is correspondence to and from the board. Item 7.1 and 7.2. There are letters from the Board of Education to the Midland Area Community Foundation and letters to the Board of Education from Jacob Sinclair. Item 8, scheduled activities. That's a list of our remaining meetings for December 20 through December 21, and then we have approved tentative dates going through June 20th of 22, and those are outlined in the agenda. That will bring us to item 9 on the agenda, our study discussion session. And at this point, are there any issues or topics of clarification that we need to discuss before I turn the floor over to Mike? Okay, Mike.
I have one, Scott.
Yes.
Last month I had asked this, and I wanted to ask it again because see we don't have anything on our schedule. When will we get an update on the equity audit?
Yeah, so I think DeAndre is ready to give me something for a Friday letter, and
okay.
Then he's going to present to you. He's sitting right behind you, Brad, as I'm looking over your shoulder in January, the findings of it. Is that correct, DeAndre? Yep. So we're going to give you something the Friday letter. He's been working on that. That'll give you a written update and then a full board presentation in January, if that works for you.
Okay.
Okay, Mike, the floor is yours.
So John mentioned in our FFO committee the East Lawn property. If you recall, when we closed the school and eventually demoed it, our statement was we would work with the community on the future use of that property. We were approached by the city as well as the Community Foundation in a partnership to look at the redevelopment of that property into housing. And so there's a need for housing in that neighborhood and the type of housing they're looking at. None of us are housing experts, and so we have partnered in potentially putting an RFP out for interested developers to develop that property. As we do that, we're going to meet with the community around the former building on August 31st at 6 p.m. Those letters either went out today or they will be going out, and we'll have an outside meeting to discuss the redevelopment of that property. Property going back on the tax rolls goes good for the city, good for the school district. We have, if you recall, we didn't foresee any future use of that property for the district, and certainly housing in that neighborhood would be very ideal. Proximity to the community foundation, proximity to downtown, proximity to easy transportation. There's a lot of benefits there. Benefits Central Park Elementary, which still has some open seats in it. So there's a lot of good reasons we should look at that. Construction projects are racing to at least be wrapped up enough to get all the schools and students in the school safely. It's been a short summer. If you recall, with the change in our calendar, it was a week shorter than the normal. Summer's always a fast pace. If you do about 8 weeks times 5 days, that's a lot of construction. And so they're racing. Jefferson, probably the parking lot's probably the messiest, but they promised we'll be ready to go by next Monday. They struck a water line today, so Jefferson won't have water tomorrow, but we'll get back to that. And so the projects are on a rapid pace. And as far as us being in this room, this will be the last time we'll meet here. The administration center's 85–90% complete, and HR has or will be moving back this week, and the rest of us will be moving back over the next 2 weeks, and we'll be back in that building for our September meeting. Paint, carpet, HVAC, LED lighting complete. The LED lighting project's probably about 40–50% complete in the buildings as well. And so that's part of our energy project, and then we'll start tracking that energy, and we'll report that like quarterly as well, or semi-annually, Brad, as well, and see how we're doing on that energy guarantee as we move forward. Staffing is, for the last 5–10 years has been quite a dilemma. We are certainly always proactive in that. In January, we get our retirement notice. We post a lot of jobs. We hire early, then we hire again as we lose people. We were all set to go as of a week or so ago, and we lost 2 or 3 positions in the last week. And so we've been racing to finish those. Mark's here tonight. The MCA has been assisting us with some letters of agreements on hiring experienced teachers in those classrooms. So we've been stealing a few from our partners out there. So benefit to us, not so much to them, but we'll be racing to fill those. Paras are always needed, so if anyone wants to be involved in the school business and be thinking about those openings as we go. Wednesdays are opening breakfast. Just a month ago, we intended to meet everybody at the Central Auditorium and get back to recognizing our DSA winners, our Gerstacker winners, and we have our National Round guest speaker, Judson Lapley, coming in. We will still do the majority of that out of the auditorium, but we will be having remote sessions at our 4 media centers to break the audience into a smaller group, just for safety and protection of others who are uncomfortable meeting in that large auditorium together. So we'll break that up a little bit. Hopefully we don't lose the effect of honoring those award winners that day. The audit is completed. As you know, we're always the first audit to the street for school districts right after the June 30 closing date, and they'll give you a full report. I believe it's in September, maybe October. I think we've been promised September. They're done, and we know most of the results. It's very, very good again, and so we're clean audit again, and probably in a little better financial position than we even predicted when we closed the books. So we'll continue to do very well. That's all I have for you.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. We appreciate it.
Hey, Mike, I had a quick question for you. We own the parcel that goes all the way to Bayless, correct? From Jefferson.
Yep.
So the redevelopment of all of that into neighborhoods would be likely the removal of fraternal baseball?
No, we will honor that, so it's where the fence line was for the school where it ended prior. So we would continue to honor the baseball fields.
Okay.
Unless we heard they don't want to use it. You may know better than me how much it's used, but I think they still want to use it.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know baseball's declined a little, but let me do a little work on that. But that was not our intention anyway to touch that.
Okay. And then is there any particular shortage, since we have this big audience, do you have a particular shortage, bus drivers, paras, anything out there that you want to have a plug for?
Yes, it's definitely the para-pros, always bus drivers, but I think we're at least staffed on the busing. Last I've heard on Brian, and yeah, we're close. And so yeah, any of those positions, if you ever thought about getting a little pay and enjoying being around students, we definitely need you. So it's getting harder and harder, and I think John mentioned us looking at wages to try to be more attractive, but as you know, every time we move, the private sector moves again, and it's been a race to try to attract those people to the school. But there's a lot of reasons to work for a school district, you know, from calendar to hours to our benefits. And so, yeah, those two are the biggest needs that we have. Substitutes are always needed as well. Lately, we've been doing a little better in the subfield.
Okay, I will accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for coming.